Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management, coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida. Today is Saturday, May 3rd. The time is 10 o'clock a.m., and I'm here to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. All right, so starting with the trend gauge. Again, last week we upgraded the market leaders and the short-term 21 EMA. Both indexes reclaimed the 21 EMA solidly last week, and we upgraded both of those last week. This week we have a green sub arrow with the medium term at neutral, as both indexes were able to reclaim the 50-day on Thursday and Friday. However, we're still just below the 200-day moving average on the index, but fastly approaching. All right, starting off with the highlights of the week. The NASDAQ and the S&P reclaimed the 50-day on Thursday, fueled by strong earnings reports from Microsoft and Meta on Wednesday night. Meta also raised CapEx. Notable also, the S&P ends the week with a 9-day winning streak that hasn't happened since 2004. So it's been over 20 years. If we get 10 days on Monday, that'll take us all the way back to 1995 since the last time that's happened. Also on the Big Mac 7, Amazon beat consensus, but AWS came in light. Apple services were also a little light, and Cook predicted $900 million in tariff-related costs. So Amazon and Apple both lagged on the week. Spotify smashed subscriber expectations and added 5 million versus views of 2 million. But there are 678 million monthly active users, which was just shy of estimates. And they missed earnings and revenue forecasts and issued lower guidance for Q4. Yet the stock broke out after a Thursday morning shakeout below the 50-day moving average, and Friday broke out. So that showed relative strength. Visa and MasterCard both reported strong results, with Visa CEO confirming consumer spending remains resilient. And notable strong earnings report reactions came from Oddity, Halmet, Duolingo, Hood, and LRN for the week. Reddit crushed and guided higher, but fell sharply, as on their conference call, they said April daily active users was in the single digits, and they were expecting double digits. So we'll watch that, but it definitely had a negative earnings reaction. Also on the negative front, Take-Two pushed their release of Grand Theft Auto out to May of 2026 from what was expected to be a fall release or a late summer release. Wednesday's economic numbers started off shaky with the ADP employment report change. And incidentally, you can almost count on the ADP coming out at the exact opposite of what the job numbers come out at. It seems like every month so far it's been wrong. Anyhow, the PCE came in line, which was a very good development, and the non-farm payrolls numbers crushed. And the unemployment rate came in at 4.2%. So the employment numbers show that rate cut expectations are being pushed back now. On the international front, the U.S. and the Ukraine announced a deal giving U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral resources. And also China announced Thursday night that they are ready to do some talking on tariffs. All right, going into a few slides here. Wanted to point out that the advanced decline line on the S&P made new highs last week. And incidentally, the advanced decline had a very positive divergence here, as when price broke down over the last month here, we did not go into new low territory on the advanced decline line, which we did make lower lows back here in the first part of the year, but during this entire correction, we diverged on the advanced decline line. So that's and that coincides with the AD making new highs. So this shows you that there's very good breadth underlying the market in the S&P. Another interesting chart from Ryan Dietrich at Carson. This going back 40 years plus. This shows how many just shy bear markets we hit. In this last one, we dropped 18.9%. We did get down 20% intraday, incidentally, both in the 2011 pullback and the 2018 pullback. But a bear market only counts if we close below 20%. And what he shows is that we've had just tremendously strong results every time we've had these near bear market pullbacks, where all the 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and 12 month have all been extremely positive, showing extreme strength in both the 6 month returns and the forward 12 month returns. So, yet another positive quantitative stat here, uh, leveraging on last week's breadth thrusts. So, very good sign here. Also, if you want to know whether we're old in this bull market right now, this bull market started on October 12th of 2022, so it's 28 months long. The average is 67 months and the median 60 months. And you can see 87, was a launch of a huge bull market as well as 09. But even the short bull markets of 26 and 32 months and the COVID one, which, was only 21 months. This is still a very young bull market. So just want to show you that. Also wanted to show you some notable movers last week from the IBD. Oddity, which doesn't meet our liquidity requirements, had a huge earnings report and was up 43%. Duolingo was a huge standout, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more into our watch list. But Duolingo, which is a leader in AI learning, had a huge 27% week. CoreWeave is on our watch list, up 24%. This is a new IPO. And then again, in the data center, Train had a big week. Stride, also in the learning area, had a big breakout this week, up 13%. Dave, Power, also Quanta Services, also a data center play, was up 11%. And Roblox in the gaming area was up 11%. All right, going into the S&P stocks for the week. Microsoft was the big standout. Avgo was up 5.8% on the week. And Tesla flat on the week. Meta was up 9%. T-Mobile was up 6%. And in general, some nice green across the board. Financials showed strength. Lilly was down on earnings. And some of the oil stocks were down as oil reached the $60 a barrel mark and closed at 58 and change on the week. On the ETF front, the S&P SPYs were up 3%, 3.44% on the Qs. VIX was down again, which is a good sign on the week. The metals were down on the week, which is also a good sign. Emerging markets and the foreign markets were all solidly positive on the week. Semiconductor index up 2.8%. And technology in general was up on the week. So good showing across the board. Bonds were down a little bit on the week as the employment numbers were good. And again, this was last month, basically. Microsoft was a standout. Avgo, huge standout, up 18%. So this is showing some nice strength. Pretty flat across the board on some of the other Mag 7. Walmart had a big month. Oils were down big. FedEx and Union Pacific up here in the railroad and shipping areas. UNH had a massive week, month, as well as some of these other pharmaceutical companies, and the financials were up a little bit. But overall, Microsoft and Avgo were the big standouts in the tech area. Also, Uber up 13% and ServiceNow up 18%. APH was also had a big month, but not showing the percentages on this. And again, these companies highlighted are the ones that I'm highly interested in for earnings. Palantir on Monday, HIMS, which TurboTaxion owns, comes out on Monday, TGTX on Monday. Some of the natural gas stocks report this week. Electronic Arts, Arista, which will show us further, will give us a further glimpse into how the data center is. Axon, as well as Carvana, Kratos, Uber, AppLovin, Shopify, Toast, McKesson, and Cheniere Energy. And again, here's a look at some of the additional companies reporting on the week. This is the biggest week ahead for earnings on the calendar. Last week was over 40%. This is over 50% of the S&P reports this week. Microsoft, here's some notes on the conference call. Wanted to point this out because they said the death of our AI CapEx has been greatly exaggerated. As you recall, over the last month, there's been several reports out that Microsoft was canceling leases, cutting way back on the data center, but in general, they turned that analysis on its head and showed extreme strength there. They expect CapEx to grow in fiscal 26, but not as fast as 25. And they plan to start filling their data center space with servers. The build out of the infrastructure is there. They just need to build out the servers. We thought that would get us to where capacity met demand by the end of June, but we've seen an increase in demand. So we are still going to be short after the June quarter. Really, though, we beat expectations in Azure because of our non-cloud AI business. So this was really the standout. Their cloud business was extremely strong. This is what drove our record quarter. We saw accelerating demand with customers in every industry expanding their footprint in Azure. Still, we did well across the board. And also notable, despite what Google told you about their AI search, we gained market share with Bing and Edge. Also wanted to highlight Meta's key areas. Again, we know they beat and raised. We know their financial performance was great, but they increased their CapEx from 60 to 65 billion to 64 to 72 billion. So that was very good news for the whole data center CapEx area. And they said their increase in CapEx outlook reflects additional data center investments for AI efforts and higher infrastructure hardware costs. So that's it for the slides. Let's go on to the charts. Starting with the S&P 500. Again, great week, up 2.92% on the week. Reclaimed the 50-day moving average on Thursday and further advanced above the 50 on Friday. Again, downward sloping 50-day, starting to downward slope on the 200-day. So our expectations would be for maybe some consolidation, or if we do run through the 200-day, maybe some backfill or riding along the backside of the 200-day. NASDAQ, same thing, up 3.4% on the week, still below the 40-week moving average, but within shooting distance. Q's closed basically right below the 40-week moving average. RSP the same. The NASDAQ equal weight the same. Russell had a 3.2% increase on the week, still well below all its averages. VIX contracted 8.7% at 22.28. So getting into the teens, which we like to see volatility contracting. So as volatility contracts, we should start to see some better setups and some better follow through on our leadership list. US dollar was flat to up 0.5% on the week. Yields were up on the week. The 30-year yield, again, climbed a little bit. The 10-year yield at 4.32 on the week. Bitcoin advanced again, up 1.7% on the week. Semiconductor index up 2.8% on the week. Gold fell 2% on the week. Silver fell 3% on the week. Miners, Europe was up 1.74% and just shy of all-time highs. Then the Mag 7, led by Microsoft and Meta on the week, was up 3.3%. Going into the Mag 7, Meta reclaimed the 40-week moving average. Also reclaimed the 200-day and the 50-day moving average on Friday. NVIDIA still well below the 200-day, but reclaimed the 50-day on the week. Tesla still below its 40-week moving average. Again, we took a starter position in this in GROTECTION on Friday, looking to add above 291.85. Microsoft standout on the week, reclaiming all its long-term moving averages. Gap up above the 200-day, closed at the low end of the range, but then reclaimed everything and closed at the high end of Thursday's range on Friday. So that's very nice development on Microsoft. And Google still kind of just putting along. Amazon, again, up slightly, 0.5% on the week on so-so earnings. And Apple, the only Mag 7 down 1.8% on the week. So definitely the weakest one out of all of them. Now going on to the watch list. Tons of stocks reporting earnings this week. Netflix, the standout, again, we all have positions in this in GROTECTION, and me personally, advanced another 5% on the week. Definitely the liquid leader with a beautiful double bottom base breakout the week before last and continued with 11 straight up days last week. Okay, Kratos with earnings next week, relative strength making new highs. Incidentally, this aerospace and defense group is the number 4 group, and there's several names here breaking out. So this area looks very good. Lore, the new IPO I talked about last week. I believe they had a secondary offering on Friday, so they took that down below the 8 EMA, but it closed toward the high end of the range. So still in the pivot zone on this big cup with handle. IPO base, again, just shy of its all-time highs. It was able to break through, but then pulled back in. So this is a stock looking good. Rocket Labs, again, another name in this area that we're watching. Helmet had a beautiful double bottom base breakout on earnings this week, and it just continues to lead in this aerospace area. Boeing looking very, very good. Was able to break out into the double bottom base breakout pivot. Again, not a huge volume showing, but quietly approaching, again, this big area here, which would also be a breakout into new stage 2 uptrend. So this is a name I'm highly watching. OSIS was a huge breakout. Doesn't meet our liquidity requirements. I don't think DRS does either, but again, wanted to show you all the breakouts in this area. Cardinal Health advanced further this week, and Altria still showing tightness. CrowdStrike broke through this double bottom base, or this cup with handle base, and continues to advance. Another liquid leader. Rubrik also relative strength making new highs, approaching the double bottom base breakout. Zscaler was able to break through this nice, clean, and simple base area last week and advanced 6.9%. So the security area showing relative strength. LRN with an earnings breakout of the stage 1 base last week. Again, this education area showing extreme strength. ATGE is another one. Take Two, again, down about 2.6% on the week on them delaying their Grand Theft Auto release into next year. Roblox, not making any money, but relative strength making new highs, and definitely a standout in the gaming area. IBM and the foreign banks continues to make highs. Spotify with a beautiful double bottom base breakout. Again, this is what you want to see with a company missing earnings and lowering expectations, but was able to break out after a nice shakeout on Monday or Tuesday, actually. So again, huge volume, and I took a position in this week on this strike. Duolingo, huge standout here. Again, after this Morgan Stanley upgrade, and then for it to be able to follow through and break through this stage 1 cup and handle. Great sign here, huge volume on the week. I mean, they crushed across all fronts. Really, the standouts in this to me were this company's using generative AI to improve their educational offerings. They announced the launch of 148 new language courses, which more than doubled their count this quarter. And this is very interesting. It took them 12 years to develop their first 100 courses. And with generative AI, they were able to do in 1 year what it took them 12 years to do, and more than double, from 100 names in 12 years to 148 names in 1 year. So during the quarter, they announced 150 new courses. They also have math and music offerings, and they also launched the addition of chess, or they're going to announce the addition of chess in the coming weeks. So this company is expanding vastly in the language as well as other educational offering. And they're proving they are able to use AI to just dominate this space. So this is definitely a stock you do not want to ignore. And I'm watching this for a pullback, hopefully back into the pivot zone. CRS, a GROTECTION name, which broke out of a double bottom base the week before last and followed through on earnings this week. So this was a nice 7% gainer for the week in the specialty metal area. And incidentally, this area is a big supplier to the aerospace area, which we saw so many names breaking out of as well. Root in the insurance area has earnings this week. Johnson Control broke out of a double bottom base with relative strength making new highs with earnings this week. Axon with earnings this week. Geo further advancing with earnings this week. Sprouts had earnings this past week, continued to show positive relative strength. Dutch Brothers still kind of lagging a little bit here, but they have earnings this week. So this report should help hopefully either break this stock out or send it back into the base. MicroStrategy, another 6.9% on the week. Great job with TurboTection on that pick. TKO advancing relative strength, leading new highs in with earnings next week as well. Walmart still hanging in there. This is another area I'm watching, the natural gas LNG area. 3-week tight here with earnings next week on Cheniere. Robinhood, we all took positions in this stock this week. Had a little bit of a negative reaction to earnings, beat and raised across the board, but still trading very tightly in this little shelf area. So watching that for a potential breakout. Deutsche Bank continuing with the foreign money center banks. eBay had earnings this past week, trading tight, not much movement there. Probably shouldn't even be on the list right now. DoorDash with earnings next week and a double bottom base breakout. Melee with earnings next week with a double bottom base breakout, and Palantir with earnings on Monday. So we got a really nice gain on this, holding a position going into earnings. We'll see if it can break out of this later stage cut base. SAP with follow through post earnings here the week before last. Broke out of the double bottom base on the week and made new highs. Very good sign there. CoreWeave, a new IPO that TurboTection bought early last week, but got shaken out, unfortunately. Went on to have a huge week, up 10%. So definitely a name we don't want to take our eyes off of here. ServiceNow, follow through from the previous week's earnings report. Land Bridge just doesn't meet liquidity requirements. Make My Trip with relative strength making new highs. Guidewire broke out of a double bottom base this week. GE Verona, which we're all in here, and GROTECTION and me personally, was able to reclaim this post DeepSeek area, which shows this is a leader in the alternative energy space. So great week for GEV, continuing to add size into this. Airgain doesn't meet our requirements, but just shows the strength in the new data center building area. Quanta Services had a nice move this week on earnings. Again, propelled it back above its 200-day moving average as it is kind of bumping up against this 40-week. So nice sign there in the heavy construction area. So they serve this power area as well as the data center build out area. Carvana with earnings this week, going to be watching that one. And Toast, definitely a stock on the watch list. Nice can slim numbers. Could break out on earnings this upcoming week. TGTX with earnings on Monday. One of my holdings I'm going to be watching. ADMA also with earnings this week in the biotech area. Excelis, another stock, which trades really nice in a stage 1 base in the biotech area. Arginex in the biotech area also with earnings this week. So you can see huge week for earnings. Bellring brand, after a 4-week tight, has earnings on Monday. And this is a stock which has a lot of institutional sponsorship, nice growth. And they make protein and protein shakes and protein bars. So this is definitely a stock which is one to watch. Uber with earnings this week. And again, a holding for TurboTection and GROTECTION was able to break through and coming up on this big stage 3 base consolidation pivot. Lifetime with a double bottom base setup here. Earnings this week. Definitely another name we're watching. Penumbra a little bit disappointing, but still hanging up in this double bottom base breakout area. GROTECTION tried to position in this and just turned out to be too illiquid. We sold it out. I personally sold a third of my position and we'll give it maybe another couple days. Boston Scientific with a double bottom base breakout. Williams Company, another natural gas stock with earnings on Monday. Going to be watching this as it trades tightly in the stage 1 base. Comfort System, another stock in the data center building HVAC area, which had positive earnings week. CLS, Celestica contract manufacturer, was able to reclaim the 200-day moving average post earnings here. So again, we're starting to see some green shoots in the data center area. Commvault with coming up on a double bottom base breakout post earnings. Amphenol, another stock which I really like here. Again, they make all the connections for fiber optics. They're heavily into the antenna areas. They made new acquisition there. Great numbers across the board and an institutional quality stock in a stage 1 base breaking out. Avgo, nice week here, big month last month. Again, looking at the monthly here, had a huge bounce here, up 14.9% on the month. Reclaimed its 40-week and 30-week moving averages coming up on the 20-week here. Earnings still out, but again, seems to be the leader in the semiconductor area here. And that is it. Also, next week, there are some economic numbers. It's pretty light, but we have the Federal Open Market Committee meeting coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. So next week, we could get some shake up with the Fed the Fed interest rate decision and Federal Open Market Committee meeting next week. So that brings this weekend's review to an end. Again, my email is Todd@Revere Asset Management. My Twitter is @ToddMichael70. If you'd like to become a Revere client, our phone number is 855-REAL-WEALTH. And that brings this week's weekend roundup to an end. We'll talk to you next week.